People who encourage the transfer of more weaponry to Ukraine are only condemning tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers to death and thousands of Russians to death as well. They're extending this war, lengthening it, but ultimately Russia is going to win this war. That's just an absolute guarantee. And the longer this war goes on, the more likely it is that Ukraine will cease to exist as a nation state. Don't get caught up, and I'm not saying this to you, I'm saying it to the people listening, don't get caught up in the propaganda and the disinformation surrounding this Ukrainian offensive. Yes, Ukraine has won a battle. Yes, Ukraine has regained a lot of territory. But, at the end of the day, Germany launched a lot of attacks against the Soviet Union, won many battles, gained a lot of territory. But at the end of the day, Germany was defeated. And at the end of the day, Ukraine will be defeated. There's no military calculus. There's no military math that anybody can put forward that shows Ukraine being able to defeat Russia. As the Russian president said a little while ago, we haven't even begun. Our full capacity hasn't been expended. Ukraine right now is operating at 100%. Russia's operating at 20%. Russia has a lot more they can do against Ukraine, and Ukraine doesn't have much more they can do against Russia. And NATO knows that if they get directly involved, this is very risky because the Russians know what's going on. They know that this is NATO intelligence. They know that this is NATO command and control. The battle plan that we just saw unleashed wasn't drawn up by Ukrainian generals. It was drawn up by NATO generals. The logistic support plan is a NATO logistic support plan. The weaponry is NATO weaponry. Training is NATO training. And as you pointed out, it's not just the mercenaries that you see on the battlefield. There is hundreds, if not thousands, of contract military personnel, not from the United States, I don't believe, but from Great Britain and other nations that are working side by side with the Ukrainians to use this advanced weaponry and to exploit this intelligence. So this is a NATO army. That's exactly what's happening here. And Russia, they need to be careful because at some point in time, if you do back Russia into a corner, Russia's going to call a spade and say, we're fighting NATO. Now, I don't believe Russia wants to expand this conflict to include any other nation other than Ukraine. But people need to understand that, a proxy war can only be called a proxy war so long as there's a real proxy doing the fighting for you. But the second you start to insert your own capabilities, it's no longer a proxy conflict. You're at war. And NATO is on the razor's edge of qualifying as being in direct conflict with Russia.
Clearly, this seems to be a war for resources. Russia wants to be in cahoots and control the Ukrainian resources. The West wants to be in cahoots and control the Ukrainian resources. And that seems to be what most wars about. Am I wrong about that?
Well, I mean, resources play a role. There's no doubt about it. But I would say that's secondary. This war is about two things. For Russia, this war is about creating the conditions for establishing a new European security framework. This is what Russia insisted on back in December of last year before this special military operation began. They said, all we need NATO to do is stop expanding. Don't come into Ukraine and withdraw the NATO military technical means back to the 1997 boundaries. That doesn't mean that Poland and the Baltics stop being members of NATO. No, they can stay. Russia said, we just don't want major NATO military infrastructure in Poland or the Baltics. That's too close to our borders. We're not happy about this. And for the United States, frankly speaking, it's about getting rid of Vladimir Putin. I mean, the economic sanctions that we imposed were designed, and Americans need to wake up to this. They keep saying, okay, you can be against Putin. You can say, I don't like Putin. I disagree with all that. But the sanctions weren't designed to hurt Putin. The sanctions were designed to destroy the Russian economy by destroying the Russian people. Right. It was a declaration of economic war against the Russian people. And, there was a lot of Russians that were against this war, but once they saw the sanctions and realized what was going on, they realized where the enemy was. And the enemy was in the West. These sanctions have failed, and that's the bigger picture here. They failed. They've backfired. And when you take a look at the war in Ukraine, you have to understand that for Russia right now, they're in the catbird seat. You see, it's September now. The weather's pretty good. It's a little warm. October is going to change. November is really going to change. And in December, people are going to start to freeze to death. And not just in Ukraine, but throughout all of Europe. And all this rah-rah enthusiasm for supporting Ukraine is going to diminish as people are fighting for survival. And this is Russia's major counterattack. And I think we're going to see a geopolitical shift in how the world views Ukraine as we enter into 2023. And many of these European politicians who supported these policies will have been removed by their governments collapsing in a sea of revolutionary unrest that's probably going to break out in many nations in Europe. So that's the bigger picture right now. It's more than just a military conflict in Ukraine. This is about geopolitical posturing. This is about economic warfare. This is about what the world's going to look like 5 years from now. Russia and China have united. They're against what they call American hegemony, this rules-based international order that Blinken and Biden are selling. They're against it, and they're winning. Most of the world supports Russia and China. That's what a lot of Americans don't understand. The vast majority of the world supports Russia and China, and they're supporting them in ways that are undermining us. The dollar may not be the supreme currency in the near future. So these are realities that have little to do with the battlefield and everything to do with, the posturing. And the frustrating aspect of it is it didn't have to be this way. Literally, all the United States had to do in December is formally say, Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. And had we said that, this war would not have happened.
Scott, well, thank you so much for your analysis on all of this. I really enjoy reading your stuff. Tell everybody where they can find more of your analysis.
I post everything on my Telegram page. I've been permanently banned from Twitter for daring challenge the official narrative. So everything goes on Telegram, and it's just simply Scott Ritter on Telegram.
Yeah. All right, Scott. Well, thank you so much for joining us.